Captain Elias Thorne stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, watching the red light blink steadily on his console. It was a distress signal, weak and old, coming from a dead sector of space where no one dared to travel. The place was full of ancient debris and ghost signals, leftovers from a terrible war long ago. Most captains would have ignored it. But Elias wasn't most captains. He had always believed that if someone was calling for help, they deserved a chance. Where did the ship? To change course? The crew was quiet as the Valkyrie slipped through the darkness and approached the wreckage. The shattered remains of a moon floated ahead, its pieces glowing faintly under a broken starlight. Hidden in the debris, they found a small alien shuttle. It was dented, its hull cracked and blackened by fire. The computer showed one weak life sign inside. Elias didn't send a team, he went himself. He boarded a shuttle, locked his armor, and flew into the mess. As he floated through the broken shuttle's hatch, he kept his rifle ready, not knowing what to expect. The air inside was thin and cold. Lights flickered. Wires hung from the ceiling. Then he saw her. A young alien woman lay slumped against the wall, her skin a soft blue, her eyes half closed, glowing faintly violet. Her body was bruised, her breathing shallow, but she was alive. Elias dropped his rifle and lifted her carefully. She whispered something, her voice weak and filled with pain. His translator caught part of it, something about a mate, something about safety. He didn't think much of it then. It just knew she needed help. He carried her back through the dark tunnel of the ruined ship, through the drifting metal and sparks, back into the light of his shuttle. He placed her gently on the stretcher and looked into her glowing eyes one more time before she passed out. Then he flew back to the Valkyrie, not knowing that this simple act of kindness would change everything. As the crew rushed her to the medical bay, they stared at Elias with confusion. Some joked, others whispered. He ignored them. His focus was on Huron, the strange energy in her touch, the way she had looked at him like she already knew him. As the ship moved to safer space and the alien girl lay recovering under watchful eyes, Elias Thorne sat in silence, staring out at the stars. He had answered a call for help. He had pulled one person out of the dark. But deep inside, something told him this was only the beginning. Sailorie, the alien girl Elias had rescued, began to wake slowly in the medbay of the Valkyrie. Her breathing steadied, and color returned to her smooth blue skin. Though the medical crew stood by to help, she pushed them away gently and kept her eyes locked on Elias whenever he entered the room. She seemed to trust only him. Whenever he approached, her body relaxed, and she even smiled faintly, her glowing violet eyes softening. Elias didn't understand why, but he felt a strange calm when near her. The translator struggled with her language at first, but over time, he learned her name Solarian, her story. She belonged to the Varelian Dominion, a powerful and ancient alien race known for keeping to themselves. They lived far beyond the nebula reaches, protected by thick radiation clouds and a psionic barrier. Most humans had never seen a Varelian up close. Now Elias had one in his medbay. Laurie told him that she was the daughter of a high noble family, part of their ruling caste. Her shuttle had been attacked by space raiders while on a secret mission, and she barely escaped. Her voice trembled when she spoke of the battle, but when she looked at Elias, her expression changed, filled with strange admiration, as if she saw something in him that he couldn't yet understand. As days passed, her bond with him grew stronger. She followed him through the ship, stood beside him on the bridge, and refused to be far from him. The crew began to notice. Some laughed quietly, others watched with puzzled looks.
Elias
Tried to explain that she was simply grateful, but even he could feel something deeper forming. Her touch often carried a warm pulse of energy like a gentle spark. She would reach for his hand without a word and smile as if comforted by his presence. Then, without warning, a massive Varelian war cruiser appeared near the Valkyrie. It was dark and elegant, shaped like a crescent blade, its hull covered in glowing lines of purple light. Elias hailed them and allowed the ship to dock. A group of Varelians boarded, led by a tall figure in gold armor. They marched through the corridors silently until they reached the medbay. The moment they saw Salari standing beside Elias, they all dropped to one knee and bowed their heads. The commander, eyes glowing with the same energy as hers, stood and addressed Elias directly. His voice was deep and serious. "You have taken the right of rescue," he said. "You are now her, mate by blood and soul." Elias stared at him, stunned. He tried to argue, to explain that he was only helping. But Salari stepped forward and held his hand. Her expression was calm, but there was something strong in her gaze. She looked at the Varelian commander and spoke clearly in her language. The translator processed slowly, but the meaning was clear. She had accepted Elias as her chosen bond. The commander nodded with deep respect, then looked at Elias with something between awe and pride. "You are one of us now," he said, "and we will protect our own." Elias didn't know what to say. He had never meant for this to happen. But as Salari stood beside him, her hand wrapped gently in his, he realized he had crossed into something far bigger than a rescue. He had been claimed not just by her, but by an entire alien people. And deep in his chest, something stirred. Not fear, but purpose. A feeling that this strange connection was only the beginning of something that would shake the stars. Elias had barely begun to understand what being Salari's mate meant when everything changed again. Alarms suddenly rang through the Valkyrie, flashing red and loud across every deck. The crew rushed to their stations as the ship's sensors picked up multiple unknown ships entering the system, fast, silent, and heading straight for them. Elias ran to the bridge and stared at the display. Dozens of dark shapes were closing in, moving like a swarm. The Varelian commander, still aboard, stepped beside him with a grim face and one word: Galor. Elias had heard rumors about the Galar machine-based beings from the edges of the galaxy, built like insects and guided by a single mind. No one knew where they came from, only that when they appeared, civilizations vanished. The Galar didn't negotiate. They didn't speak. They destroyed and moved on. Now they were here. The Varelian war cruiser activated its shields and moved to defend while the Valkyrie prepared its weapons. Fighters launched, turrets rotated, and Elias gave the order to engage. In space, everything lit up with fire and light. Other drones swarmed like metal locusts, small and fast but deadly. Human pilots fought with skill and nerve, weaving through tight gaps and firing missiles into the heart of the swarm. Varelian ships used psionic weapons, beams of energy guided by thought, glowing with bright purple streams that tore through Galar hulls.
Ow.
But no matter how many they destroyed, more kept coming. Elias stayed calm, directing the battle with sharp focus. He had fought before in other wars, but this was different. This was a test not just of his ship or his skills, but of trust between two species. And slowly something amazing happened. The Varelians followed his orders. They trusted him. His human crew worked alongside alien warriors, sharing tactics and covering each other's ships. It was unity and chaos. Still, the Galar were relentless. They sent a massive carrier, 3 times the size of the Valkyrie, into the center of the fight. Its side opened, spilling out hundreds of drones. The sky darkened with machines. Bridge Elias clenched his jaw and made a decision. He took manual control of the Valkyrie's railgun system, targeting the carrier's weak point. "Fire everything," he ordered. A storm of blasts erupted, smashing through shields, tearing into armor. The Varelian cruiser joined with a focused beam that cracked the carrier's center wide open. A moment later, the ship exploded in a ball of fire and broken metal. The Galar retreated, scattered by the blast. But this wasn't victory yet. It was a warning. The Galar had tracked Salari. Her escape had drawn their attention, and now they knew about the Varelians. As quiet returned to the system, Elias looked out into space, thinking about what came next. Salari stood beside him again, her face pale but proud. She touched his arm gently and said, "They will come again, and not just for me. They want everything." Elias nodded slowly. The danger wasn't over. It had just begun. The Galar had found the man, now they were awake. With the Galar threat growing stronger, and the Valkyrie damaged from the last attack, Elias made the call to follow the Varelians into the heart of their hidden territory, deep within the nebula reaches. The journey was dangerous, the space around them filled with thick radiation and swirling energy storms that could tear ships apart. But the Varelian cruiser led the way with grace and precision. A psionic gateway opened ahead, formed by strange glowing crystals mounted on massive floating pylons. And as Elias's ship passed through, the stars bent and shimmered until they arrived at a breathtaking world. Varelia was a place of beauty. Beyond imagination, vast green forests that glowed under a blue sun, floating islands that shimmered like jewels, and towering cities of crystal and light suspended in the sky. Elias stared out from the bridge in silent wonder, his crew just as stunned. This was the home of the Varelians, and now it was his refuge too. Once they landed, Salari brought him through a shining corridor into the high tower, where the ruling council waited. Along the way, Varelian citizens watched him with wide eyes. Some bowed, others whispered words he didn't understand. It wasn't fear or hate, it was respect, reverence. They saw him not just as a visitor, but as someone important. Salari, always calm, explained everything. Because Elias had saved her life and stood beside her in battle, he had formed a bond stronger than law. In their culture, this bond was sacred one of love, trust, and power. To them, he was her chosen mate. Elias tried to deny it, to tell them it was a misunderstanding, but Salari placed her hand on his chest and said quietly, "You are more than you know. You are what we need," sighed the council chamber. 12 elder Varelians sat on floating thrones. They listened to Elias speak of the Galar threat, how powerful the enemy was, and how they had no mercy. He told them that hiding would no longer work. Sooner or later, the swarm would find Varelia and destroy everything unless they were ready to fight. The elders were silent for a long time. The Varelians had lived in peace for centuries, using their energy to grow, build, and dream, but they had forgotten war. They feared it. Yet now, with destruction at their gates and their princess bonded to a human warrior, they had no choice. One of the elders turned to Elias and asked, "Will you show us how to fight?" Elias looked around the room, then at Salarian nodded. "I'll teach you everything I know," he said. And just like that, a human became the war guide of an ancient alien race. That night, as the stars moved slowly over floating gardens and glowing lakes, Elias stood with Salari on a balcony. She looked at him with quiet strength and spoke softly. "You didn't just save me. You brought us hope." Elias didn't feel like a hero. He only knew that another war was coming, and if they were going to survive, it would take all of them, human and Virelian, standing together. He watched the stars and whispered to himself, "We'll be ready." Elias didn't waste a single day. Once the Varelian Council gave their approval, he turned their peaceful world into a training ground for war. The human fleet he had called earlier finally arrived, 3 Terran cruisers and a squad of fast fighters, each packed with skilled engineers and battle-tested soldiers. The Varelians watched in awe as the humans set up training fields, flight simulators, and firing ranges. Elias stood at the center of it all, commanding both sides, making humans and Varelians work together. He taught the Varelian pilots how to fly with precision and speed, how to dodge missiles, how to shoot with purpose instead of panic. He showed their soldiers how to move in formation, how to defend positions, how to fight in the dirt and not just in the air. The Varelians were fast learners. Their minds were sharp, and their psionic gifts made them even more dangerous when trained properly. They began to blend their powers with human weapons, charging rifles with energy, guiding bullets with thought, creating shields that pulsed with psychic force. Elias watched them change. They were no longer a peaceful race hiding behind their nebula. They were becoming warriors. The bond between the two species grew stronger. Human engineers studied Varelian technology and mixed it with their own, building hybrid fighters that could fly faster and hit harder than anything before. In return, opened their vaults of ancient knowledge and taught humans how to shape energy and sense danger through the mind. Salari was always at Elias's side, watching him lead, standing proudly among her people. She trained to not as a noble, but as a fighter. Her psionic strength became more focused, and when she entered a battle simulation, even seasoned human officers stopped to watch her. Elias felt something deep in his chest whenever he saw her fight. She wasn't just a symbol anymore. She was a soldier, and she believed in him. Then the sky darkened. The Galar returned. A fleet of enemy ships poured from the stars, darker than night, and countless in number. But this time, they brought something new. A massive warship, shaped like a dying star, bigger than any moon, drifted into orbit. The Varelians called it a hive crusher. Its presence alone shook the atmosphere. Every sensor on the planet screamed. As it charged a weapon that could burn an entire world in one shot, fear spread across Varelia. Civilians fled into shelters. Soldiers trembled. The council panicked. But Elias stood tall in the command chamber and raised his voice. "We hit them first. Not with fear, with everything we have." His words sparked fire. The humans launched their ships, and the Varelians followed. Pilots who had once flown only in peace now raced into battle like streaks of light, side by side with human aces. The ground forces loaded their weapons, psionic blades humming with power while fighters roared overhead. The time had come. They were no longer just preparing. The war had begun. Elias knew the fight ahead would decide the future, not just of one world, but of two peoples who had become something more together, and he would lead them to the end. Above the shining world of Varelia, the stars turned into fire as the Galar fleet descended, their black ships spreading across the sky like a moving shadow. The massive hive crusher loomed above all, its surface alive with glowing red lines. As it charged its planet-killing weapon, Elias stood at the heart of the command deck, eyes sharp, voice steady as he guided both human and Varelian forces through the chaos. Hybrid fighters launched in waves, engines glowing blue and purple. As they tore into the swarm of enemy drones, human pilots flew with fearless precision, weaving through tight enemy formations. While Varelian warriors unleashed psionic blasts that cracked Galar ships open with pure force, explosions filled the sky, debris burning across the horizon, like falling stars. But the Galar kept coming. Thousands of drones rained down on Varelia's surface, smashing into cities and forests, spreading destruction. Elias gave the order ground teams were deployed. He didn't wait behind. He suited up in a specially built Varelian battle armor, powered by both human AI and psionic tech. Solari joined him, her eyes glowing with battle fire, her body surrounded by a shimmering shield of energy. Together, they led the counterattack. On the ground, the fight was brutal. Galar war machines crawled over buildings, fired plasma bolts, and dropped smaller bots that swarmed like insects. But the defenders didn't fall back. They fought harder. Human soldiers with railguns blasted apart enemy units, while Varelians sent waves of energy crashing into the battlefield. Elias moved like a force of nature, cutting down machines, planting explosives, giving orders over the coms while shielding others with his armor. Solari fought beside him, her mind glowing with psionic light as she turned entire squads of enemy bots to ash. They fought as one each move in perfect sync. But the hive crusher was still in the sky, charging. Its core glowed brighter every minute. Elias knew what had to be done, called for a boarding team, gathered the best fighters human and Varelian and launched a final assault straight at the heart of the beast. Their ship was small, fast, and built for one thing: penetration. It dodged enemy fire, flew into a narrow vent, and crashed into the center of the hive crusher. Inside, it was a nightmare. Endless metal halls pulsed with red light, echoing with the clicks and screeches of Galar drones. The team pushed forward, blasting through wave after wave, every step closer to the power core. Elias led from the front, his armor scorched, his breath ragged, but his will unbroken. When they reached the core chamber, they saw it huge, humming, ready to fire. Elias pulled the nuclear charge from his pack and set it at the base. As they turned to leave, Galarbots swarmed in. Were cut off. Elias fought with everything he had, covering the team, giving Solari just enough time to force open an emergency exit with her mind. She screamed his name, begged him to run, but he stayed until the timer reached its final seconds. Then, just before the chamber lit up with fire, he jumped. The blast tore through the hive crusher from the inside out. Above Varelia, the sky turned gold as the enemy supership exploded, Pieces of it rained down harmlessly, and the remaining Galar forces scattered, leaderless and broken. Cheers rose across the cities, both human and Varelian. The impossible had been done. It destroyed the heart of the swarm. The battle was over. The world was saved. And Elias had survived. Solari caught him when he landed, both of them, bruised, bloody, and breathless. Around them, soldiers gathered, shouting with joy. Two armies, two peoples cheering as one. The war wasn't just won. It had changed everything. Elias looked up at the sky, still glowing with burning wreckage, and knew this day would be remembered forever. When the battle was over and the last piece of the hive crusher burned in the sky, a deep silence fell over Varelia. Not one of fear, but of peace, of survival, of pride. The people who once lived only in the safety of crystal towers and glowing forests now stood shoulder to shoulder with human soldiers, their armor dented, their eyes full of fire. They had fought for their world and won. The Galar were gone, broken and scattered, and for the first time in a long time, the stars felt safe again. Elias walked through the main plaza of the capital, surrounded by both species, nodding to warriors who had followed him into fire. Some saluted, some placed hands over their hearts, and others simply smiled. He wasn't just the human who saved a girl anymore. He was the man who helped save an entire race. The High Council called a gathering under the twin moons where a ceremony would be held. Crystal lights floated above the crowd as thousands gathered in a great circle, surrounding a raised platform carved from glowing stone. Elias stood beside Salari, who wore a battle cloak made from the banner of her house torn during the fight, now stitched with both Terran and Varelian colors. As the council elders spoke of victory, of sacrifice, and of unity, Salari stepped forward and raised her voice so all could hear. She told the story of her rescue, of how a stranger had pulled her from death, not knowing who she was or what it would mean. She spoke of how he stood beside her, taught her people to fight, and led them through darkness. Then she turned to Elias, took his hand, and looked him in the eye. "He's not just my protector," she said. "He's not just my mate by right. He is the bridge between our worlds, the heart of our hope." The crowd responded with cheers that shook the very stones. Lights rose into the air, songs echoed across the hills, and in that moment, Elias felt something powerful. Not just pride, but belonging. He had come from Earth, from a place where he never expected much more than orders and battles. Now he stood on an alien world where he was more than a captain, he was family. After the ceremony, as the moons lit the sky, Elias and Solari sat on a balcony, overlooking the valley where the final battle had taken place. Fires flickered in the distance as people celebrated below. Solari leaned against him, her voice soft. "You gave us more than strength," she whispered. "You gave us a reason to rise." Elias smiled and looked up at the stars. The war was over, but something bigger had begun, a bond between two peoples, sealed not by power, but by trust, courage, and love. He didn't know what came next, but he knew whatever it was, they would face it together. And this time, he wasn't alone.